So it's a great honor for me as the president of the International Association of Universities to welcome you all to this webinar co-organized by IAU and the Qatar University. This webinar forms a part of the series developed by the International Association of Universities since 2020 and reflecting on the future of higher educations. And the outcomes are to inform UNESCO's World Higher Education Conference, which will take place in Barcelona now in May. And IAU appreciate this cooperation we have now with Qatar universities, and we actually look forward to a successful webinar. So with this short introduction and welcoming, I give the floor to you, Dr. Hassan Rashid.
Thanks, Pam. Thank you, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. We are really honored to jointly organize this webinar with the International Association of Universities. I think, through the recent years and what we have witnessed, whether it has to do with the pandemic or with the current crisis that we are witnessing nowadays, I think it is very important to readdress the importance of international cooperation between universities in higher education. I am glad to have, that I am joined here by, distinguished speakers in the panel, and I'm sure that we will come up with, very fruitful recommendations out of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then I will give a short introduction to the webinar itself. And as you said, Dr. Hassan, the focus of this webinar is international collaboration in higher education. Internationalization is and has always been in the heart of higher education, in education and in research. The climate changes, the pandemic, the COVID-19 and other challenges that the world is facing actually demonstrates really the need of global approaches and cooperation, and to reach the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and also realize Agenda 2030, which actually 193 countries have ratified. So all societies around the world must be equipped to meet global and local challenges and to provide the citizens of tomorrow with the skills and competence to face the future challenges. Therefore, international cooperation is crucial for sharing existing and creating new knowledge, to recognize and respect diversity in societal, economic, and ecological and cultural conditions, but also to see the value of multicultural societies. However, as we all know, increased democratization, raising nationalism, increased geopolitical tensions is actually leading to a more closed world. And this has affected the higher education institutions in many perspectives: finances, requirements, influences, and also restrictions on higher education institutions in research and education. And I will highlight the threat to fundamental values of higher educations, which includes the academic freedom, institutional autonomy, social responsibility locally and globally, cooperation and solidarity based on mutuality of interest and shared benefits, and not at least tolerance of divergent opinions and freedom from political interference. These values are the key of higher education institutions to fulfill its unique role in societies. And I see it's so urgent that the higher educations cooperate jointly to promote and defend those values, to bring awareness and understanding therefore. So international cooperation is really required. And during this webinar, we'll discuss the importance of the international cooperation in a panel with several distinguished speakers, and I will introduce them one by one when I ask them to give a short statement. And then I will have some questions to the panelists. And I will mention right now that after that we have a question and answer session, which will be led by my colleague at the Office of IAU, Giorgio. So please, during the panel discussions, come with your questions through the question and answer, which is preferred, but if not, use the chat box so we can have your questions ready when we open for that. So with those words, I would like to give the floor for 3 minutes of statements from Dr. Hassan Rashid Al-Derham. Give the floor to you.
Yes, Pam, thanks again. Yes, I think the question here is about how do we see the effects of changing geopolitical contexts on international cooperation at university or institutional level. We at Qatar University not only do we see it or see the effects of the changes of geopolitical context on international cooperation at institutional level. In fact, we have experienced them many times lately. As probably you know, Qatar University has seen both phases of the importance of international cooperation in the recent years. There is the ugly side and there is also the good side of it. So the ugly one was during the blockade that was imposed on us, and that we can reappearing now during the Ukrainian Russian crisis. However, the good one is that it was in fact during the pandemic, where our partners were essential to our swift recovery preparation to face the pandemic and supporting our government with existing literature. So despite all that can be said, geopolitical and politics in general affects day-to-day running of any institution, let alone a higher education one. Our faculty, students, community were affected by the blockade imposed on our country a few years back and for 3 years. And mobility, but also degree issuance and research collaboration suffered as a result at that time. And I see this happening again now, where due to the conflict initiated by politicians, the hostility is generalized to all aspects: culture, sports, travel, and of course, academia. On the other hand, the pandemic showed that international collaboration can help overcoming risks on humanity as big as the pandemic itself. So our partners who had a sad head start on us due to COVID, and for example, here in China, as well as in Italy, they were hit hardly at that time, and they were hit before us. They provided us with all research and procedures that had at hand at that time. So colleagues from Italy and China reached out when asked and helped us curb the effect of the pandemic. So these two examples show that not only are we affected by the geopoliticals or geopolitics, but we can also have an effect on it. Through international collaboration, the biggest hurdles can be overcome while by limiting international collaborations, conflict are fueled to last. The blockade on Qatar lasted 3 years and more. Who knows about the conflict in Ukrainian crisis, while the world and academia has helped contain COVID in approximately the same time, if not less. So universities are microscopes of the world, and any changing context, geopolitically or other, has an effect on them whether on teaching, research, mobility, budgets, and lifestyle.
Well, good morning for me. Good afternoon, good evening for everyone. What a pleasure to be with you today, and thanks for the invitation and best regards from Ottawa. I'm very pleased to see that there's also a student among us, because it certainly reminds us that what we're there for. Without students, there would be no universities, there would be no research. So it's always a good reminder, and thanks, Ellen, for your presence. I became university president 6 years ago, and I must say that wow, have things changed in the last 6 years with regard to international cooperation and the geopolitical realities. When I became president, international cooperation was a nice to have. It was something as satellite to what we were doing. And right now, I can tell you as university president, a good part of my work every week is spent into dealing with international issues, geopolitical issues, government issues brought forward by these new geopolitical realities. So I would say certainly that now international dimensions and international cooperation strikes at the very heart of all aspects of our mission. And it is the same for all Canadian universities. And I must say that it's getting more and more complex and more difficult to deal with, and that our core principles and the one of academic freedom, among other things, are being challenged left and right and very seriously by all sorts of geopolitical situations, including our own governments. So I'll be pleased to describe that, but I think that universities and certainly my university, we are at crossroads in many respects, and we will have to take tough decisions very shortly concerning many aspects of our mission. Final message, certainly, and I keep hammering that with my community and certainly in Canada, universities are in the business of the long game. We are playing the long game, and we should not cede to the sirens of the immediate gains, political gains, or immediate sort of political news of the day. We were there certainly 100, 200 years ago. We will be there 100 years, 200 years down the line, and we have a duty to maintain the core mission of universities, despite the political pressures, despite the geopolitical changes. So, and I guess we'll have a chance to elaborate on that. So thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you very much. And let us remind that we have been there for centuries, and we will be there for centuries and been through a lot. So then I would like to invite Ignacio Sánchez from rector at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Not my language. So please.
Thank you so much, Pam, Hassan, Professor Frémont, Camille, Helen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, discussing about international collaboration. I guess, as my predecessors were saying, there is a history in each university, there is an effect of the pandemic, there is a focus on a project for the future. We do have more than 35 years of history of international collaboration. We started with the exchange in students, and then we follow with exchange in professors. Right now we have about 15% of our staff internationals, professor international. All the positions are internationally posted. And before the pandemic, we did have about 2,000 students coming for one semester or even 1 year. Of course, the past 2 years has been a severe decrease in that flow. But we are seeing now that, let's say for this year, we will have close to 500 coming, and a similar number going out of our country. So we are based on a history of internationalization, as Professor Frémont was saying before. We are seeing this as a need, not as an option. About 50% of our research is done with international centers. So I guess over the pandemic, all of us were much more involved through webinars, through this virtual methodology, to be connected, to know what was happening in different parts of the world, to learn about new strategies, and to remember that this is a connected world, and the pandemic was something that reminds us that everyone has to learn from different realities, and everyone has to teach their own experiences. I guess it's so wide, the area of internationalization, that one has to prioritize the focus. And I guess these international forums are very important. We congregate a lot of good universities, and it's an opportunity to interact and to strengthen the network and the relationship. And also for us, we are focusing in certain universities in different continents, because we really think that it's better to go deep with a few numbers of partners than so wide with a large number of partners. Of course, we do have to make a good extent of different continents. That's why I guess here we have this representation that is so valuable, and also depending of the scope of each university. Ours is a very comprehensive university, from arts, science, social science, theology, medicine, etc. So in that case, we have to also find good partners to interact in a two ways methodology. So thank you for this first question, and I'll be very open to discuss in the exchange of experiences.
Thank you very much. And I would like to highlight what you're saying, that the perspectives of looking into quality instead of quantity is probably a most important thing for the future. So the next, I will give the floor to Ellen Dixon, who is a member of the steering committee of the Global Student Forum. And this is an umbrella organization of the major representative students federations. We are happy to have students with us at this webinar. Welcome.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Much appreciation. It is an absolute pleasure to be here, and we want to extend our thanks to the International Association of Universities and to Qatar University for inviting us into this space with you. It is a real privilege to be here with such incredible panelists. Yeah, so the Global Student Forum is very, very happy to engage for us. Well, while the term university globalization is very well known in current political discourse, it is sometimes a little bit difficult to articulate what this means. Higher education is increasingly presented as a key infrastructural area for economic recovery, global positioning, and sustainable development. The current expectation is that higher education will contribute to stronger states, a growing knowledge economy, generate human capital, and influence a country's reputation abroad. Amidst geopolitical tensions, universities are taking on a significant role in developing the soft diplomacy and soft power skills for international cooperation. But we must look a little bit further to comprehend the lived experience of this cooperation. Students are often reduced to the new diaspora, a wandering public caught in a competitive educational environment. but they are also the representatives of diverse publics, peoples participating in the democratization of education. The Global Student Forum represents democratically elected student unions who see themselves as intrinsic to this cooperation through leadership, diplomacy, activism, and negotiation. Such student bodies have been historically entwined with geopolitical contexts and remain the key mobilized publics of higher education who support social change. Since 2019, the Global Student Forum has brought together diverse student publics from Europe, Africa, Latin America, parts of the Commonwealth, and the Pacific to support cooperation among the student bodies of the world in a worldwide union for students in a globalized context. Thus, we absolutely welcome this conversation this panel is focusing upon and uphold it in our own practices as essential to the success of higher education in the community locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. The core tension that exists is when we, as the academic community, are unable to come together in solidarity to recognize our shared humanity is what contributes to solutions for geopolitical uncertainties in our education system. And I'll be back to you, Pam, for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to remember that the students are the future leaders and the future citizens, and have that in mind all the time. So then I will give the floor to Dr. Camille Salinesi, from the Vice President from the on International Relations at the University of Paris in Sorbonne.
Thank you, and also good morning, everybody, and thank you to the International Association of Universities for inviting me in this webinar, which I think is going to be extremely interesting. So, why is international cooperation so important in my university, University of Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, but also in any university? Maybe before I start, you know, the sentence that represents the best of my university is knowledge and excellence for all. And when I say for all, it means both inside the city, but also around the globe. And behind that is international cooperation, very simply. The international strategy and international cooperation are important in my university as it is in any university, just because of the basic principle of what a university is. The principle of university is openness. Openness means openness to the world. Second, international cooperation is at the crossroad of several things in any university. First of all, it bears the basic values of any university, both the individual values of each and every university, but also its political values, the values of the country in which it is, but also maybe the diplomatic values, in the sense that any university creates a link, a bond between countries around the world. Also, it's at the crossroad of all activities within the university. Research has to be international. Education has to have an international aspect. Innovation has to be international if you want innovation to be actual innovation. And because it's at the crossroad of all activities within the university, it involves anybody within the university. And last, what I want to underline is the fact that any university has its own strategy for international cooperation, but and can decide freely of its strategy, but it's not without taking into account the fact that there are external factors. These factors can be the rankings of universities, international or national rankings. They can be also the events that occurs. We have already discussed about the COVID situation, wars, and other conflicts and international conflicts, but also the political, the national political projects that sometimes call for an action by our university, and some consistency between the national levels and the university levels.
Thank you very much. And now I will start with the questions, and I'll give them to a couple of you at the time. And so the first question is for Jacques, Frémont, and Hassan, and I ask Jacques then to answer first. But the question is, do you see effects of the changing geopolitical context on international collaboration at institutional level? And what are those changes, tensions that you see, and how would you see these being overcome? And maybe you also reflect on any input or restrictions from the governments in the situation we are right now on the university. So, Jacques, I give you the floor first.
Yes, thank you, Pam. What a great and difficult question. If I may, in order to answer what are the changing political, geopolitical context and its impact on at the institutional level and our collaboration, I would like to share maybe four, how can I say, four elements which have changed the geopolitical landscape for universities in these recent years. And I think there are common challenges for each and every of our institutions. And I put them in no specific order of importance, but certainly one of the elements, and that's the first one, is certainly the new immigration, or I would say demographic mobility, which we have to face. I mean, the populations are shifting, people are moving, international students are moving, but also refugees are moving across borders. Our countries face visa processing issues, face all sorts of issues, and there are tensions coming with that, and universities are very much takers of these new population moving in our country. So the demographic change and the new demographic mobility is certainly a first, I would say, geopolitical challenge. Another geopolitical challenge is that we now admittedly share common issues which have a common impact on our societies. And I would say the best example is clearly climate change. Climate change cannot be ignored by any country or by any higher education institution. We have a responsibility with regard to that. But I would also add wars, for instance, going on this planet, the Sustainable Development Goals, so on and so forth. We share that in common. We cannot be isolated in that respect, and that calls for a tighter, I will say, a tighter international cooperation between our universities. The third geopolitical challenge, certainly, I see is the relevance of science. Science has never been more relevant in our societies. I think the vaccines demonstrate the importance of science, but also the alternative discourses, the alternative realities, the lies, the frauds, the hate, which comes with the freedom of expression now, very clearly challenge notre fonds de commerce, I would say in French. Notre fonds de commerce is what we are there for. We are there for science. We are there for some objective perception of reality. We're not there to push lies and to push false truths. And God knows now, our scientists and we are challenged as institutions because of these social media and because of all the lies and the half-truths we find in these social media. So I think we're being challenged as an institution, and that's a very real new geopolitical challenge. And the fourth challenge, certainly seen from Canada, it might not be the case in your countries, for me is clearly security issues. Our governments are taking positions with regard to what is being the behavior of certain countries. And how can I say, we are certainly, how can I say, we are more or less forced to espouse these positions, despite the fact that universities, because of our role in society, should remain the one institutions which, whatever happens politically between our countries, universities should be able to keep contact, we are again playing the long game, and immediate security issues by our countries should not destroy the importance of the links between our countries, the science, and between, of course, researchers, science, but also between students. Student mobility becomes even more important. It becomes crucial for the new societies for the world society we want to build. So four sets of issues, which for me have always existed, but now they're right in the middle of the place and they have to be taken into account. And for me, the obvious solution is obviously to have a stronger links between universities which share these values of academic freedom, the values of preparing tomorrow's youth, and also to contribute to the building of better societies in our respective countries. So international cooperation becomes a necessary passage. It becomes, and we have to, I mean, the IAU is already there, other associations are there, but I think we have to step up our game. We have to intensify more than ever our cooperation and our reflection in front of securities issues, of demographic challenges, in front of common challenges like climate change. I mean, the more cooperation there will be between our institution, and that's both bilateral. We have to choose partners of choice, privileged partners, but also multilateral. It's extremely important. It's also important that our national associations, in Canada we have two, that our national associations are linked with other national associations so that we can learn from each other. So for me, the conversation we're having today is demonstrate the crucial importance of getting together and really what do we do in front of academic freedom, attempts for academic freedom, for instance, and I think a necessary oxygen for us, for each of us, would be to discuss these things and maybe to learn from each other. Again, we are there to play the long game, and we have to keep that long game always in sight. And sometimes it is difficult in the short term, but we have to keep, as we say in French, straight in our boots and keep walking for the long term. So thanks, and of course I will be pleased to discuss all that later on.
Thank you very much, and I will give the floor to Hassan. And a reflection for me is what you're saying is also competition versus the cooperation, which has been also a part of the higher education system for a long time. So please, Hassan.
Yes, Pam, thank you. I cannot stress more than what Professor Frémont, mentioned here. I think, the word university, also, it's from universal, that brings people together, and the intellectual society that, each university has. This has to be maintained during this, either geopolitical, crisis or through, conflicts or whatever, I think, any country, the last resort for it is the university, where it is the reservoir of the intellectual people of that country that contain the wisdom of the country, the wisdom of humanity. So universities has to be kept away from any, political games or pressures or any effects that may affect them, and we can do this only by, these type of, having such type of dialogue that we are having today. I think, you know, International Association of Universities should take the lead, you know, and the outcome of this, of our discussions should be also elevated to the, as mentioned earlier, to the UNESCO's, you know, conference later on in Barcelona. So I think it is important for us as, you know, innovative, you know, communities for universities to preserve the academic freedom, to, you know, as mentioned earlier, with the challenges that has been, you know, mentioned, the four, you know, challenges. I could not agree more. For example, student mobility, with all these demographic changes that we are facing. Again, we have witnessed this during the blockade against Qatar, and I kept, you know, mentioning this because I don't want to go back to have something similar, because I see it now almost happening now with the current crisis. So I hope that, you know, we learn from our past, so that we don't repeat the mistakes that politicals or, you know, others are trying to impose on universities.
Thank you very much. I think you bring, we do have a lot in common, and we do have things to jointly stand up for, and we, of course, we could strengthen that position, I think, globally. So then I would like to leave the floor for Ellen to get the student perspectives on this. And what do you see on the geopolitical context, tensions, and also what do you see how to overcome?
Thanks for that, Pam. I think the simple answer to that, do you see the effects? Yes, we do. Absolutely. And it's fantastic to hear the other responses from the panelists thus far. Very insightful. Looking at this question, the first thing that I think about is the statement made by the Vice-Chancellor Gardiner from Australia's Monash University, who said, we are in an age of geopolitical uncertainty. It is the hallmark of a world-class university. You are global, your staff are from everywhere, your students are from everywhere, your knowledges are drawn from everywhere. And students obviously are very much a part of this everywhere, which has already been stated. They are the recipients often as academic staff of these uncertainties, whether it be climate change, fiscal uncertainty, or the pandemic. We are also greatly impacted by the world rankings for universities, the accreditation, regulation, and quality assurance of higher education that is now taken up largely at a supranational level, with like UNESCO, the World Bank, and Quahe coming along, and the change and rise in tenocracies, which we're seeing, which makes a huge equity issue sometimes for some of our global publics for students. But students are also responsive to changing geopolitical environments in that they are a part of international cooperation. When the university sector played a role during the Cold War in the US arms and space race, the US and USSR funded students to study abroad as part of their strategy for recruiting young people from peripheral countries. Ironically, these powers also funded the global student movement, the history from which the Global Student Forum emerged long after the Soviet Empire crumbled into the geopolitical chaos of the pandemic and the re-emergence of Cold War sentiments from big powers. We think there's a little bit of a connection going on there. Students and representative bodies from all over the world are the mobilized publics, as I previously stated, who are in exchange programs and who encounter the massification of education, where institutions now vie, unfortunately, sometimes internationally for their attention. They are impacted by governmental decisions made concerning education, the rise of, say, offshore and distance learning, and the increase in flexible learning options, as we're seeing a little bit in a shift in education towards, say, stackable credits or massive open online courses. In representation, students push to be involved in their local and national decision-making bodies, on councils, on committees, on senates in higher education. These partnerships give them access to high-level decision-making to contribute to the development of equitable and inclusive higher education systems. It is this input that we believe is absolutely essential in partnership in educational decision-making for international cooperation. It is also what students already do themselves, forming self-organizing national bodies who interact with governments, regional platforms with intergovernmental agencies, and global work networks who often do actually work with these aforementioned supranational bodies as well, revealing it's not only student awareness, but proactive creation of international cooperation. My organization that I come from, the Global Student Forum, exemplifies this as an example in how student bodies attached to universities and other education providers aid in the development of collaboration against emerging ideological blocks. Forming in 2019, I'll give you a little bit of the history, the solidarity of the All African Students Union, the Commonwealth Students Association, the European Students Union, the Organizing Bureau of European Secondary School Students Unions, and the Organización Continental Latin America y Caribbean de Estudiantes. My apologies for my pronunciation, was not great there. The GSF represents 202 student unions from 122 different countries as an umbrella organization for the world's major representative student bodies and federations. They seek to bring attention to the disparities that exist between regions to find the best practice methods for engaging in governance, moving towards pedagogy and curriculum and academic citizenship, which is very much tied to the concept of academic freedom, which has already been articulated very well here. The Global Student Forum and other student bodies seek to combat sort of encroachment that we see on student and staff academic rights. We often work in partnership and freedoms through international collaboration. Unfortunately, with us seeing the rise of autocracy, witnessing government interference in educational practices, as has already been mentioned, and unfortunately, from the work that we do, the increasing number of reports of arbitrary arrest and detention of some young activists. With campuses in some nations suffering from geopolitical infrastructure tensions, such as the threat to social and educational funding in Europe, to the lack of recognition of educational institutions in the global south and compared to the north, equitable solutions that include students are absolutely essential. Students are, in my favorite type of word, the academic citizens of the world. I think that was kind of already brought up. They are all ages now, all genders, religions, cultures, and from all walks in life. They are very diverse. They are the future leaders, as has previously been stated, of states, the professors of higher education, and the teachers for the next generation. And it is the recognition of this as very central to education as a whole that is necessary for basically understanding and providing for the geopolitical context of higher education, not only for the present, but for collaboration in the future as well. Thanks for that, and I'll turn it back to you, Pam.
Thank you very much. And maybe these students will be the most important ambassadors to the politicians to get the changes, you know. So then I'll go to the next question, and that is, are there directions outlined for specific international corporations with certain countries, certain institutions, and by whom? And as I said before, there are many actors now and stakeholders who try to have input on what we are doing, and we also see from the government who has an influence on international corporations. Unfortunately, I would say. So I give the floor to Ignacio Sánchez first to give his reflection on this question.
Thank you, Pam. Well, direction for specific international cooperation. I guess the networks are a very important platform. And I will say, taking some comments from Professor Frémont, I will say that there are certain topics that are very important. One of them is gender issue that has to be tackled as a group. The other one is inclusion and merit. Quality and diversity of universities has to be in a balance. I guess for us, a more diverse university is a better university. But one has to realize that for diversity and for having a more inclusive institution, you have to put efforts, you have to put resources, time, and you have to realize that it is a compromise, not just open the university to different groups of students, but also to have an invitation for a graduation, not only for an admission. During the time that they are admitted to the time that they are graduated, it is a combined effort from the student, from the professors, from the institution. Other thing that has to be taken in an association, in a group, in a cooperation is the academic freedom. Academic freedom versus cancellation policies versus to follow waves of ideas. It is a risk, I guess, for our universities, and a university alone in a country or alone in a continent or in a world is less effective to put certain issues. We have seen in different countries and in different parts of the world this cancellation policy that I guess is very worrisome for our universities. Universities has to be the main place where everything can be discussed, provided, of course, to have a respect and to have a peaceful relationship between the community. But we have to make an effort to give examples to society, making the point that everything can be discussed inside the university, and from the university to expand to society. University has to be certain like laboratories of ideas, where the idea is reflected, is discussed, and then the results of this discussion, this reflection is export to society. Those will be my reflections in this time.
Thank you very much. And you also bring it to the table that the university themselves has to bring awareness to the societies of the importance of the fundamental values which we are acting on. So then I give the floor to Camille.
Yes, when you ask the questions of the directions that an international strategy of the university can take, or universities in a country or in a region can take, you might expect a list of countries with which you want to create collaborations. And I think it's not the way to go. But before I explain my answer, I'd like to remind what international cooperation entails, what it means. It means, of course, a series of agreements with other universities and other higher level institutions. Behind these agreements, you have actions such as student exchanges, double degrees, delocalized degrees, staff and researchers or academics mobility. And on top of these agreements, you have a lot of cooperations projects, which can be research cooperations, research projects, but also that can be capacity buildings project, where we learn from each other how to do what we do. And then on top of that, there is a third kind of activities, which are programs for inviting academics or welcoming academics who are in trouble in their own country. Sometimes trouble means difficulty to practice their freedom of research. And sometimes it means lives being threatened because they are researchers, because they are academics. And sometimes it's because of what they do and the research they do or the research results they have. When you have this in mind, then you can think of what directions can mean. Directions can be, of course, the kind of collaboration you want to have, depending on research topics, in terms of research topics, for instance, or in terms of what you want to learn from each other when you have capacity buildings, collaborations, and projects. But also in how you want to implement those values we've been talking over and over again. Then there is this influence of external, there are those external influences of events, of politics, of diplomacy. What we want to create in terms of strategy are strong agreements. Strong agreements are agreements that will live whatever the political issues will be, whatever the events will be, for a long time, that will create strong bonds in terms of ability to cover several research topics, ability to entail both research and education, both students exchange and academics and staff exchange, both mobility and education programs such as delocalized degrees or double degrees, as I said. These strong agreements can be created because we have the will to create those agreements with specific universities that we think are beautiful universities that look like us, or on the contrary, because they don't look like us and we want to learn from them. But also under the influence, for instance, in Europe, under the political influence and will to create links within Europe or create strong groups of universities within Europe, but the same can apply in other regions and continents. There is also an important goal to keep in mind. It's the fact that whatever strategy we have, this strategy should contribute to the international of the university in itself. It's not just actions, it's also the outcome of the actions that matter. And the outcome of those actions can be for the students, for the country, for the diplomacy, but also they are for ourselves as a body. And of course, when we think about that, we have to think about all the internal obstacles to internationalization. Just to take an example, when you think about the students who can't have a mobility, you have to really look for the reasons why they can't have a mobility. It can be because they are in dual degrees and it's difficult to find an international mobility when you are in a dual degree. It can be because they have a contract with a company, for instance, because they are apprentices, and it's difficult when you have this kind of contract and you work for a company to have an international mobility, and so on and so forth. What you want to do is to act on those obstacles and undertake projects so that anybody can access to those international cooperation actions. And of course, you always have in mind the importance of strategy at a higher level, not just your own individual university strategy, but also the international strategy of your country, of your region, of other universities within your country or around the world. It's not just about you, it's also about the others. And how in this big game, it's not risk I'm talking about, but there is a game which is larger, broader than each of us. And you have to take all this into account. Of course, you want to have an influence of the others, but also you want to learn from the others. It's not just about soft power, but also about accepting what the others want to do and their values and what they can bring to you.
Thank you very much. We have a lot of inputs, and we could have been discussing for hours. And I think that you have been giving very many inputs. And I would like to add to this last question the responsibility to see that we are doing capacity building and cooperation all around the world, that we don't leave any part of the world behind in this case. So the fourth question, and I would like to ask you just in 1 or 2 minutes, give your view on what kind of expectations do you have for international collaborations for the future at institution, national and international level? Just in a few sentences. And for Ellen, of course, what do the students expect? So I think that I start with Hassan. What's your view?
Thanks, Pam. Academic progress, in fact, occurs through peer reviewing process. And when we say peer reviewing, whether it is for, publishing a paper or an academic promotion, usually, occurs among the society or the community of, collaboration between universities, whether locally or international level. So I always see that, and I realize that, the importance of international collaboration for short and long term, for universities. So we had always realized the importance of this realization at Qatar University in terms of research, capacity building. And we, as Qatar University was also constantly ranked among the top universities in international collaboration through the Times Higher Education ranking indicator. And that was because of the diversification that we have among our students, among our faculty, and among the research collaboration that we have, and the research outcome and output among local and international researchers working with Qatar University. So our nationals are encouraged to go study abroad, not because we do not have good programs or academic programs in Qatar, but because we really encourage them to be immersed in other cultures and come back to the country enriched with this new knowledge, because we believe in diversification. Our National Research Fund encourages collaboration. In fact, up to 30% of the any grant could be spent outside Qatar, and in fact, out of 50% of the time effort could also be spent outside Qatar, and this is really encourages international collaboration among researchers. As I mentioned earlier, in both incidents through the pandemic as well as the blockade, our international partners proved to be the backbone of our success to overcome unfair regional boycott and to find solutions for our community to face COVID and preventing loss of lives. So I believe that openness of universities, of societies in general to international collaboration will go further, and so as as our university will build stronger ties with its international partners, because we see we see no other choice for us except to go to this direction if we want to progress.
Thank you very much. Jacques?
Yes, thank you for that. And thank you, Hassan, for sharing these very relevant thoughts. I would say certainly for the University of Ottawa, and for me, the short answer to the question is we have to do more and we have to do better. We all know the importance, for instance, of student mobility. Very important. We have to do more. More students have to be mobile, but also certainly for us at the University of Ottawa, and with respect to my colleagues from France and Britain and the UK, we want them also to meet the richness of the world and the diversity of the world. So we want them also to be able to go to the Gulf, to Latin America, to African institutions, so on and so forth. So it will be extremely important to diversify. So more mobility different and richer, I would say, mobility. More and better also in terms of delivery of courses. We have all learned during the COVID crisis that it is possible to teach remotely. It is certainly possible, and we're experimenting that, to teach, to have joint courses for students and faculty members, despite the time differences, to have joint courses where people interact with the groups interact, and they have joint faculty members overseeing that. That will certainly enrich the international experience, but without having to leave your campus or leave your program. So we want to systematize that, and we want each and every student to have at least one occasion of studying with other students abroad without even leaving the campus. So more and better also means certainly to diversify to a greater extent what we teach. Issues of diversity have been raised left and right since the beginning of that session, and I think it's extremely important, certainly for Canada, because of our population, because of our values. But that diversity and the pluralism in terms of intellectual approaches have to be strengthened. Certainly, I mean, we have a lot to learn about, I don't know, post-colonial approaches, about anti-Black racism approaches, about feminist approaches, about LGBT2Q approaches. So we have to be, to offer a sort of richer intellectual adventure. And that certainly international cooperation can help in that respect. So in short, I mean, two words: more and better. And we will rely at the University of Ottawa on international cooperation to do more and to do better. And I think it will greatly enhance the student experience and greatly enhance faculty members and the whole community. We will all gain at that.
Thank you very much. Ignacio Sánchez?
Yeah, they are so comprehensive, the answers, that I would like to put another emphasis or another topic. And this is internationalization in-house, at home, in the university. Along with the international exchange, we are making a big effort to increase the English language at the university, to increase the exchange of our staff, professionals, administrative people, to open different areas of management examples inside the university, to do a real digital transformation of the institution, because we really believe that everything that we do strengthening the nexus or the links with other institutions has to be implemented in our own institution as well. We have a big number of migrants from Latin America, from different countries. We are opening links with the Catholic University in Ukraine to open slots of positions from Ukrainian academics, students and staff. So our dream, Pam, will be to live inside the university and sort of international university. Ours is the only one that has a vice presidency for international affairs for the past 2 years ago. But this cannot be just from the university to outside or to different countries, but also inside. That's why we value so much this kind of networks. I would say that almost every week or twice a week there are webinars, seminars with different countries, and we are doing things inside, like the week of different countries, the week of Sweden, or the week of Spain, or the week of Canada. Actually, I have to say to Jacques that I spent 4 years in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I have 2 Canadian kids. I mean, kids are older now, but 2 were born in Manitoba. So I have my beautiful remembrance of my stay in Canada. So we wanted to put in front of the community of our university that we want to become the more international university we can, living inside this kind of environment, and also doing better and more, as Professor Frémont was saying before.
Thank you very much. And Camille?
What do I expect for the future? I expect change, impact. And this I expect internal and also external. Internal impact on our students, of course, on our staffs, on our academics, on our organization, and on our research. External, because the same way as I expect through international cooperation other universities to have an influence on us, I expect that our international cooperation allows us somehow, for the best, I hope, to have some influence, some positive influence on other universities, students, academic staff, and research. I also expect international cooperation of universities to have an influence on society, and maybe because we have the role of ambassadors, and we do play this role of ambassadors, to really have an impact, a positive impact on the diplomatic relations between universities. And of course, these changes, these impacts, they are based on strong cooperations, of course, but they need to have some beauty in them. They need to be consistent with the fundamental principle of what universities are, and also on the academic values we've been talking about all along this webinar.
Thank you very much. And last but not least in this round, Ellen, the student perspective. What do you foresee in collaboration?
Thanks for that. Obviously, the most immediate response I'll give, particularly from my background, is the expectation that students have for international collaborations always meaningful cooperation and co-creation. What that looks like is translated in every single context when we are in that. But one of the key elements is their recognition of the legitimacy as a student body as being both symbolically and structurally recognized and welcomed, but also the freedom to be able to move in education and journey through that process without being hindered to a certain extent. We recognize basically that the only pathway towards social change is to consider how this form of collaboration, rather than just, I say, cooperation, collaboration being key, can generate sort of an inclusive and transparent and open-minded conversations regarding what is higher education, what will it look like in the future for decision-making, but also for application. When we come to what our hopes will be for the future and our expectations, we are largely aspirational. A lot of the things that I can list are very aspirational, but are very much in the same vein as what's already been stated here. One, for example, being we would like to see higher education provide space for minority Indigenous voices and research processes. That's very key to my country. And I know many of the other countries who are here too, in addition, the provision of equal recognition of education qualifications, as was articulated in UNESCO's Convention on Global Recognition in Higher Education. You know, we've got large amounts of war-torn countries with refugees now, and having the recognition of them traveling across borders for them and migrant communities in those spaces is so key. Another one is obviously going to be student mobility. We come back to the one quite regularly, but also to stimulate economies, particularly post-pandemic. How does that work? What does it look like? How do you incentivize it? I know there are some really key projects going on in Europe at this stage that are asking those very important questions. Another one is, can we create curricula that aids in university commitment to lowering their carbon footprint? That's become quite a big conversation going on, and how it's going to be worked out will be different for every institution. Another one that I know my colleagues in the US would be interested in is choosing to minimize tuition fees. How do we go about that within the current financial structure of higher education, particularly in course-related costs? When we're thinking about the increasing of student debt, within my country, students report that they are considering whether or not they will have children on the basis of how much systemic intergenerational debt they have ended up in. And that's including international students, with this perception that they are somehow wealthy, when in reality, families are now taking out loans in order for their children to be able to study. Another one would be furthering incorporating civic values into courses and research. One of the big ones that I'm an advocate for is, how do we teach academic freedom within courses? How do we establish an understanding of what does that look like for the student in the context of the classroom or the lecture hall? How do they know what that looks like unless their supervisor or their lecturer is actually functioning in that process and explaining to them what it looks like? Because very many students don't know what academic freedom is, unfortunately. So how are they able to actually work in partnership with academia? And in addition to that, it would be to minimize the shuffle of precarious early career academic researchers from job to job. The increase on fixed term contracts has seen the younger generations who are in doctoral environments constantly struggling to find their way into permanent roles within academia. These are the ones who want to maintain their relationship with academia. They see this as their home, their place to flourish, and not always finding that space to know how to flourish, and finding international solutions for that is really, really important. So yeah, there are a number of ways that we think that this could be incorporated locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. Obviously, most of these revolve around the lived experience of the student, but very much tie to the institution itself and how that functions on a daily basis, but also typify what's actually occurring in the globalized environment and its successes and its challenges. So that is a bit of an aspirational statement, as I said, including like how collaboration in addition to cooperation will be key for the interpersonal, but also the intergenerational games where these aspirations may be actually able to be actualized. So yeah, that's our comment from the student body.
Thank you very much. And I hope that we can continue this type of dialogue, and we will. And from the IAU perspective, we will actually promote this more and more. And I used to say sometimes when I was a rector, there was often the international office, it was said, what's in it for us at this university. I think we have to leave that. It's not what's in it for our institution, what's in it for higher education at the global level. And we can do on each one, we can do our things, and we do have a common framework for which we work. So I hope that cooperation will be leading for the future among higher education institutions and for the next generations to really get access and get the possibilities to develop a sustainable future for all of us. So thank you very much for this panel. And then I will give the floor to Giorgio, who will handle the question and answer. And I don't know what it looks like there.
Thank you very much, Pam. So we have a couple of questions and we have about 10 minutes, so maybe we will be able to address both of them. But let me start from the first one. And first of all, apologies for my misspelling of the name. The first one is coming from Jinan Karameshaya. And the question is, considering that international cooperation in higher education is very significant, how practically this is reinforced, especially to achieve education for sustainable development? You already touched a bit this aspect in your presentation. Is there anybody of you who would like to take the lead on this question among the panelists? If it's not the case, maybe Dr. Hassan, can you start replying to this question?
Okay, I would start, my answer by saying, 2 years ago when this pandemic, started, who had heard of Wuhan, the city in China? At that time, when the virus started to spread, we, for example, here in Qatar, we thought that this is something, local Chinese issue, that they will deal with it. However, 2 months later, it hits every door all over the globe. It forced every planes to come down, all plans to close, universities, everything to closer and to close. So this shows us how how small is this world, and how any aspect could affect all of us, and we are facing similar challenges. So when we talk about sustainable development here, this is something that crosses boundaries, not only cities or within a city. So I think humanity, especially here, universities, they have to work together to achieve, for example, the sustainable development goals by the United Nations, and to address these challenges as mentioned earlier, whether it has to do with the climate change or the sustainable development or others. This is an aspect that gives us another indicator that we have to work together, and we have no other choice but to do so.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan. I see Ignacio Sánchez would also like to reply. Please go ahead.
Yes, it's just, thank you for the question. It's just to comment that we are participating in the UN global initiatives for the ODS, and we are making a coordination for Latin America with Los Andes University in Colombia. So sustainability is one of the main areas of our strategic plan. And the more you go in, the more you realize that sustainability and internationalization are synonymous. You cannot do it by yourself. I guess the initiative from the United Nations gives you some kind of umbrella to follow certain lines and to interact with other universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see also Dr. Jacques Frémont would like to add something, please.
Yes, maybe very quickly. Thanks for the question and thanks for the answer so far. Of course, universities have a role to play with regard to sustainable development, and I would say certainly to incorporate all these values and issues in our teaching and certainly in our researching. One point I'd like to add, certainly it is my experience, our students have been extremely forceful and able in pushing us to, for instance, to divest and to take sometimes difficult decisions. And it's not the first time I've publicly thanked students. I mean, the first time sometimes they have crazy ideas, you don't really listen. And after a few years, these crazy ideas sink in, and it was the thing to do, and you should have reacted earlier. So what I'm saying here is that in terms of sustainable development, universities as entities, as universities, we have to be model citizens. We have to inspire not only by our teaching and our researching, but also by our behavior and by the way we behave as citizens in the society. And we will inspire more young people, and we will be better models for the rest of society. And it's not always easy. It means taking a lot of decisions on our campuses. Some of them are expensive, some of them are not so fun to implement, but I firmly believe that one of the roles of universities is to be ahead of the wave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frémont. So I think we have 5 minutes, so we can also address the second question. And I would start probably by Dr. Salinesi and Ellen to reply to that question, because they have not replied already. So the question is, how do you address the post-colonial mentality that is still maintained by some higher education institutions for center countries? This affects transaction. And the question is by Lorraine Chua Garcia. So I think, Ellen, you might start because you touched this point in your presentation.
Thank you for that question. That's so incredibly valid. I work in my country alongside the National Māori Tertiary Students Association, Te Mana Ākonga, who play a very strong role in engagement in scholarship and research. One of the things that we've noticed is for true international cooperation for post-colonial mindsets is not only the decolonization of the curricula or pedagogical structures, but also the ability to have Indigenous and minority scholarship actually featured in international journals. This has become something of paramount importance, because just because you have a scholarship in the nation doesn't necessarily mean that it's reflected out in the broader community. So yeah, I think that's included, but also within the actual governance structures of higher education institutions, having positions that are available to those who have been in those minority situations or in countries who are coming out of a colonial scenario where that kind of conversation, those tough conversations that are not always easy to deal with as nations are moving forward, can be had in a way that is equal and transparent and open. Yes, it is a conversation very, very dear to my heart and to my colleagues who I work with. But in our context, in our culture, we say that it's about the mana, the social dignity and power that brings us all together in community. So I think that's always a good step towards a post-colonial mindset. Cool. Thanks so much for the question.
Thank you very much. Maybe Dr. Salinesi, you would like to add something on this question.
Yes, well, you know, being a member of the Sorbonne, I might answer with a researcher post, except that I'm not a social science researcher, so it will be difficult for me to go in depth. But yes, deconstruction has its roots in the Sorbonne, and I guess that's one of the angles. Research and the social science and human science approach to the issues of decolonization is, of course, extremely important, because it asks the fundamental questions, which by being addressed allows each and every one of us to go in the right direction, let's say. But then as an individual who's not expert in this discipline, I'm just the vice president in charge of international relations. And as such, my concrete approach stands on one particular value, which is reciprocity. Reciprocity is the base. Whatever I propose or expect from any other university or colleague within my university, I have to be always aware that the same can be proposed, the same can be expected from me or from us, from my university. So this basic principle is important for me as a starting point for any cooperation. But then it also has a link to the other question on sustainability. I won't say sustainable development, but sustainability. You know, sustainability is a very complex concept, which has a time and a space dimension. The space dimension is in charge owing to students. I mean, the students are the future. We, as professor academics, we are the present, but we are also the past somehow. Space is important because they are our students from our city, our country, but also from all around the world. And we want them to cooperate, to go and meet other students and other universities and other countries and other cultures from the rest of the world. And this has to be in not just from and to our universities, but this has to be understood from the point of view of any other university around the world. And I don't have any particular expectation, and I don't want anybody to have, I don't have any expectations to other universities more than the expectations other universities can have from my own university. So yeah, research and reciprocity are the two answers. I would, research and knowledge, you know, and that's a basic point for all of our actions.
Thank you very much for your reply. Thank you very much to all the panelists for replying to the question. And thank you very much also to the participant for having posed the question. Now I will give back the floor to Pam and Dr. Hassan to conclude the meeting. But in the meantime, I asked the participants to reply to a very quick satisfaction poll. So you can reply to the satisfaction poll while Pam and Dr. Hassan will close this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor first to you, Dr. Hassan, to conclude.
Yes, thanks, Pam. I would like to thank, the International Association of Universities for organizing this wonderful, panel, and the panelists that I have really enjoyed, listening to them and to learn out of this webinar. And we look forward to have better collaboration in the future. I hope that, this discussion would lead to further recommendations for the UNESCO conference in Barcelona soon. Thanks again. Thank you, everyone.
And I would start to thank you, the Qatar University, for this joint webinar and to work together with you. And I also look forward to work with you closer in the future. And I would like to send the message that the IAU is there for bringing a community of higher educations around the world for the global perspectives. And I hope that we can be promoting and that we can bring together and share knowledge and share developments all around the world. And I really invite you all to take part of what IAU is doing. Also send us ideas on how to go further on with these types of discussions, because we will have different challenges in different parts of the world. We will have challenges that we all share, but we have to have a dialogue all the time to do the best for higher education and for the, not at least for the next generation of students who are those who bring us to a sustainable world and a sustainable planet. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope to see you soon. And you are welcome with any inputs to the IAU. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.